Yes, we're back with another episode on LinkedIn Live, Selling During Crisis. I'm your host, Jonathan Otero, episode 9 of Selling During Crisis. And I'm really excited for the guest that we have on today. As I always am, I'm always excited, but this one is a little bit different. Why? Because I was a guest on his show, and now he gets to be a guest on my show. And so let me tell you a little backstory about this guest that we have on. And if you've seen the promotions, you know it's already who it is already. But a little backstory. He has a really cool podcast, by the way, the Buyer Enablement podcast. And he had a guest that I was going to have on, Todd Capone. So I watched it, of course, to, see what they were going to say. And man, I was just so impressed with this guy's production value and his audio and everything. His whole look was just really, really cool, caught my attention. And I said, man, when we're selling, these are the things that we need to do in terms of creating a different pattern in the buyer's brain. Now, I don't expect you to create a podcast like with the ones that we have or the ones that Josh has, but the premise is the same: creating an impactful pattern that breaks the person's view where they want to stop and look at you and getting yourself to stand out. That's what he does. So let me tell you a little bit about him and who he is and what he does. His name is Josh Fedie. He's the CEO and founder of SalesReach, which is a SaaS-based buyer enablement portal to meet the demands of the modern sales professional in small, medium, and enterprise organizations. They help create a better sales process and simplify the B2B buying experience. So I'm really excited. You can take a look at his website here, which we're going to show you right now. It's a really cool website, very engaging. Even the title, the very first headline there, the banner right there: enable customer-facing teams to deliver better buying experiences. Just a cool guy to have on, and I'm super excited to have him here. So without further ado, let me bring him in. Josh, how you doing, sir?
Man, what an intro. You even showed off my website in this intro. Thank you so much.
That's right.
I appreciate that. Look, I'm
super excited to have you on.
I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited to be seen however I'm being seen, but if I'm being seen with you, it's even better, dude. Seriously, I appreciate being on here. I'm going to go back to one of the things that you already said. You said that we don't expect people to start a podcast. Heck, I don't expect people to start a podcast, Jonathan. This is working well for us in our personal brand and in our business development efforts. Everybody should be looking to start a podcast or a version of a podcast, right? Be a guest on podcasts. Find ways to create content of value for people. And I guess you're totally right. They don't need to actually start a podcast. If they like to write, be a blogger, right? If you like to be on video, do a lot of video stuff like this, or do a vlog, do a podcast. There's so many different ways to produce content, but we're going to talk about this a lot today. We need to find ways for our ideal customer to engage with us in organic ways to help us build trust with our audiences. Step 1 in sales. It always has been. That's not a new thing because of this whole pandemic. It's always been step 1. But regardless, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, and thanks for being on. So like I said, I told the story in the very beginning here about how everything that you do to me, when I'm looking at sales, I'm always talking about how do we stand out. That's the goal, the premise of this whole podcast, the premise of my whole sales technique when I'm doing what I'm doing. And so everything to me that you do stands out. Your podcast, your look, your website, everything is just crisp and clear and where it needs to be to have an impactful pattern. A pattern stop is what I call it, where people are watching you and they have to stop to see what you're doing. You stand out. So tell me a little bit more about SalesReach. Why did you start that organization? Who's that for? Who does it serve? Let's dive in a little bit more into what SalesReach is.
Okay, I'll dive into what SalesReach is, but then I really actually want to get back to where you were going with that, with being a pattern disruptor, because that's super important. So we're gonna get to that, but I'll be a little salesy here. So anyone listening, don't worry, I won't be salesy through this whole thing. But SalesReach was something that I originally developed for myself 15 years ago, believe it or not. So I owned a marketing agency 15 years ago. That was the first business that I ever launched myself. And I was growing increasingly frustrated with my sales process at the time. And the challenge that I was having in sales at that time was that I would have a meeting with someone and they'd say, "This looks great. Can you send us some information?" How many of us end meetings with someone saying, great, send me some information, right? And I would load up my email with all kinds of attachments and links and all kinds of stuff. And I'd send it over to them and I'd be like, hey, congratulations, I did my job for the day. Now I can go relax for a little bit, right? The challenge was people were constantly coming back to me. They'd be going in front of their decision-making team 6 months later, and I'd been sending them all this stuff, and they'd say, I can't find this, I can't find this, I can't find this. And I'd get frustrated with them because why can't you search your inbox? I sent you everything. What's wrong? Just search my name. And then I realized this is my problem. This is not your problem as a buyer. I'm making your life challenging. I'm making it hard for you to buy from me. Why am I doing that? So I built the first iteration of our product myself. It was nothing too glamorous, but what I would do is organize all the things that someone needed from me on a single platform, a single page, and it helped me win deals a lot, and it worked really well. But I had no vision for how to productize this, and there was honestly no demand for it in the market at that time. There really wasn't. 15 years later, there was. Because 15 years later, there were companies like HubSpot in the market. There were companies like Salesforce in the market. There were ABM tools in the market. There were things that were allowing marketing teams to create these very personal, highly impactful presentations to buyers when they were in the awareness stage or the decision early in the sales process. And the problem was when those deals were being handed off to the sales professionals or other customer-facing teams, they did not have those digital tools in their arsenal to keep allowing people to go to a place where they're comfortable. And that place where they're comfortable is in a digital space. That's how people buy today. So that's when I realized there was a huge gap in the market. And there's a long story behind it, but eventually, and people can find that on other stuff that I've done, but eventually what I did was I was able to raise some money. I was able to hire the dream team to start building this digital product. And we were off to the races, man. What the vision was to combine all the tools that a modern sales professional should have in their tool belt to make it easier for a buyer to buy for them. So we put personalized video into the pages, your bio onto the pages. We have full asset management and a visual first asset distribution channel built right into our software to make it really easy for literally any group that you're talking to or any individual you're talking to, for you to just give them a hyper-personalized place to find everything they need whenever they need it from you, and you can change it through the entire buying process. It's a huge pattern disruption in the sales process because it is totally different than any other sales teams are selling right now. And when you see a SalesReach page come through your inbox from a sales rep that's utilizing our software, it puts them in a totally different playing field than any of the other vendors that they're reviewing. Keep in mind, that's what you're trying to do in sales. You know you're up against your top 4 or 5 competitors in every single deal you go up against. How are you going to stand out? That's why we built SalesReach.
I love it, Josh. And you know, yeah, and talk to me about, so I love that you created that for salespeople. It's the one of the things that I think, you know, I think sales, when people think sales, they have a negative connotation, right? They think sleazy used car salesman. Sorry for any car salesmen that are in the audience right now, but you know what I'm saying. They have this negative vibe when they automatically put up these walls when they feel like they're being pitched or sold to. And I think that the modern day sales professional has to look at different alternate ways to reach and engage their audience. And so your company and what you're doing does all of that. And so and even with the podcast that you're doing, the buyer enablement podcast that highlights different aspects of sales. And I think that's why you and I engage so much. We have so many synergies because our philosophies are the same. We want to make sales people into sales professionals. There's a professional way on how to sell, yes, and there's an art to doing this thing. And the minute that I thought about that there's an art to it, just like an actor is an art form or a singer is an art form, being a sales professional is an art form. And I love what you have on your marketing pieces and your website that says, make the way you sell the reason more people buy. I love that. Yeah. So now with that being said, tell me a little bit more about the Buyer Enablement Podcast. What does that serve, or who does that serve? And why did you decide to create that? When did you create that?
So I'll give credit where credit is due. The term buyer enablement, I did not coin that. about a year after we launched SalesReach in beta tests with customers, we came across an article that Gartner had written. And the article in Gartner was talking about the number one challenge facing buyers in a B2B space. And what they said was that the number one challenge facing B2B buyers is low confidence. And it wasn't a low amount of confidence in the sales professional they were working with, which I think would be an easy way to just assume the low confidence was, right? Nobody trusts their salesperson. No one has confidence in their salesperson, right? Wrong. What it was actually saying is that buyers in the B2B space are so inundated with so many sources of information. It's so easy to get their own information by going to your website, your competitor's website. They're downloading stuff left and right. Then sales comes into the picture and they send even more information. And at the end of the day, when they sit down to make a decision, they are completely paralyzed. It's paralysis by analysis, right? Way too much information, can't make sense of the deal. No vendor looks any different than any other vendor. And what the study showed was that they either don't move forward at all with a new deal, they just stay with the devil that they know, or when they do move forward, they move forward at a lesser dollar amount just to kind of try it out and see if it works. And that's not what any of us want, right? We don't want our buyers to be so confused that they can't move forward. And so what this article cited as the fix for this is to have a focus on enabling your buyers. And they coined it buyer enablement. And the second I saw this article, we went, man, that's it. That's what we're doing right here. We're not only focused on bringing our product to sales professionals to use this in their cold outreach or courting customers or in that early sales process. We're focused on any customer-facing team. Any individual in an organization that is engaging with a customer or a prospect in any capacity, because we're all responsible for revenue. We need to be more deliberate in our approach. We need to make it easier for people to work with us. We all have a lot of information that we need to share at different times, and we need to be focused on enabling those buyers. Now, where buyer enablement might sound familiar to a lot of people tuning in here is that I'm sure we've all heard the terms sales enablement, sales acceleration, sales and marketing alignment. You know, those are all great things, and I'm not discounting those in any way. But the big problem with those, and what I want everyone to really think about in their own businesses as well, is that those three things that I just mentioned are talking about making efficiencies within the walls of your organization to make your teams work better together, to make your teams work faster together. And that's great. We need that. But what we also should be considering is how simple we're making it for the people that are going to be handing us a check and saying, I trust you, let's move forward with this, right? Why we weren't more focused on this a long time ago, I don't quite know. I don't know why for so many years salespeople expected their buyers to buy from them the way they wanted to sell to them. That's absolutely ridiculous to me, right? Yeah. We need to allow people to buy from us the way they want to buy. And if we can do that, then we win.
Yep. And I'll piggyback off what you're saying too. I think a big mistake and a big miss for a lot of sales folks out there is that when they're selling, you don't only put yourself in the customer's shoes. Put yourself in your customer's shoes. Yeah. Understand what their customers need, and then you'll be able to create a solution that can really be a fit that makes sense for your customer. So put yourself in your customer's shoes. Yeah. And, you know, guys, as we continue to have this conversation, I want to let you know, for those of you who are in the audience watching, you can get more information at the link that I put into the comments there. Just click that link in the comments and you'll get more info and you can learn more about what Josh and I are talking about. And also, this brings up a great point for those of you who are on the live right now and want to ask Josh specific questions about whatever it is about the sales process or what his company does or what we're talking about on these topics. You can just put your comments and post your comments there in the comment section, and we can take advantage of having this gentleman on the live with us right now. Let's pick his brain. Let's ask some questions. Just put it there in the comment section and we'll get going. And to that point, we do have a comment from some of the posts that we've been putting up yesterday and today promoting this this event and this episode. A person by the name of Jake, who's, I don't know if he's going to be able to join us, he said, but we did connect, and he wanted to know, he'd love to hear a brief overview on how the overall sales process has changed over the last year. So let's get really specific, right? The last year, he's talking about COVID. And how has the sales process changed in your mind?
I mean, in a million ways. But I think that the one thing that really threw a lot of sales professionals was, what do we do when we no longer have the ability to meet with people face to face? It seemed like such a critical component in building relationships and getting to know people. Sales professionals rely on things like trade shows, networking events to kind of run into potential prospects and customers, and that's where they find a lot of their leads from. And when that rug was kind of pulled out from under us, we had a lot of questions. One of the other places that I saw a lot of sales professionals struggling right away, right out of the gate when the shutdown started happening, and sadly still struggling today, is when you're selling to a large decision-making team, and there's a lot of information and important details that need to be discussed, and there's a big price tag on it, and there's an implementation that needs to be discussed. Those presentations are really throwing people right now, because what we need to remember is that when we put together a presentation for our customers, when we put together our keynote or our PowerPoint, those were never meant to be just shared and then just read by the receiving party, right? Most of us don't put too many words onto our keynote or PowerPoint slides for a reason, because we used to be in the room walking people through it and telling them what we wanted them to know and giving them a couple visuals and a couple quick words to let everyone know where we're at with this, right? And so sales reps, other customer-facing teams really had to, rethink the way they were putting together their presentations, because it couldn't just be sending the same sort of thing that used to work, because if you weren't there to explain it and walk them through it, it just didn't work. Video immediately started to become a very critical solution to this challenge, but only for the reps that were willing to embrace video. And unfortunately, video was one of the many technologies that were available to all of us that many people were very slow to adopt into their customer-facing efforts. I think when COVID first hit, I know I'm not alone. I thought this was going to be a fairly quick problem. I thought this will be 2 to 3 months. We're going to have to figure some stuff out, but we'll get through this 2 to 3 months and then we'll be back. It'll be fine, right? 2 months before Minnesota went on lockdown, we had heard about teams that were getting grounded by their sales leadership. And I was like, what is that? And they're like, we can't fly. We can't meet with customers face to face. Everyone's concerned about this COVID thing that we don't even know what's going to happen here. And we immediately did a webinar, immediately. And we brought in as many sales leaders as we could. And we started discussing what are some of the technologies that are out there that we can all start leveraging right now to make our efforts more human and more personal and just a bigger impact without being face to face. And we really thought we were solving for a problem that was only going to last 2 to 3 months. Now look at us. It's been almost 11 months now in the States that we've been, going in between lockdown, not lockdown, lockdown, not lockdown. We're still not having events. We're still not meeting face to face. There's still people that haven't embraced these technologies. And I'm telling you right now that what's changed in sales right now has changed sales forever. I'm going to put it out there. If you don't believe me, that's fine. But here's the deal. McKinsey recently did a study. They reached out to B2B buyers at large corporations, and they said, look, sales has changed a ton. The way you work with sales professionals when you're reviewing deals and vendors and opportunities has completely changed. The dynamic is completely different. It's not face-to-face, it's digital. With that being said, if COVID were to go away tomorrow, would you want it to go back to the way it was before, or do you prefer the way that things are going right now? Over 80% of the people that they asked that question said they prefer the interactions that they're having with sales professionals today than the way they were before, and they do not want them to go back to the way they were before. So if you thought it was hard to send somebody a message and say, let's have a meeting, and actually get that meeting on the book face to face, if you thought that was hard before, just wait until COVID's done and those prospects have found reps that have found ways to be more organized, more detailed, more effective in a digital space, and you reach out to them and you're the one rep that says, I want to meet face to face. Do you think they're going to come back and say, hell yeah, let's do that? Heck no. They're going to come back and say, why can't you be more effective like the other sales reps that I've been working with? Why can't you just give me the information I need to review right now? Why can't we just jump on a Zoom? Why does one of us have to drive across town? Why does an entire hour and a half of my day have to be set aside for a 30-minute meeting with you? It can't be that important. We're still going to go back to face-to-face meetings. I'm not saying we're not going to, but what I believe is that they will be far less frequent than they ever were before. They will be held at critical junctures, not at every touch point. And we need to be effective in those in-between stages, okay? That's what everyone needs to focus on. How effective can we be in all the in-between? How can we redefine the touch points here? Can we make them more effective and more intentional? We need to be focusing on those things right now. It's going to go back to this idea of being a pattern disruptor. And John, I really want to go down this path with you. I want to get back to this pattern disruption, but it's all tied in right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said a lot there, and I want to unpack some of it because it is. I think you may have pissed some people off by what you just said, because I think right, but I think it's the truth, because everyone keeps saying, oh, when we go back to face, but what salespeople need to realize is, and we touched on this on your podcast when I was doing your episode. A lot of these sales buyers and prospects and leads, or whatever you want to call them, they're the hunters now. We're no longer the hunters. They're researching our product and what we do before they even get to us. So they already know what they want. It's not like you just now all of a sudden do a cold call. These buyers are now experts in how all the sales techniques work. And now they're accustomed to buying in this way. So once we go back to face-to-face, and once the world comes back to normal, I 100% agree with you. Before, if you're lucky enough to get them to engage with you on social media or through your prospecting emails or your phone calls or whatever tool you're using, if you're lucky enough to get that engagement, the first step is going to be like, why don't we just set up a Zoom real quick, 15 minutes, just to understand if there's synergies between what you do and what I need. And then if we establish that there is a reason for us to continue the conversation, I may grant you some time to come down to my office. And that's how it's going to be now. So you better believe that selling over the laptop is going to be a new thing for sales professionals to have to get good at, because if you don't, you're going to die. Your sales are going to be down, and I mean really down. And next thing you know, you're going to be having those uncomfortable conversations with your upper leadership and what's going on with you. How come you can't hit these KPIs? It's going to be a disaster. And so you need to get onto this. And now let's talk about pattern interruption, because you do it really great. I think when I'm using online video tools, I think I've become really, really efficient in doing that in the first 8 seconds of a video that I'm creating to a prospect. If it's a general cold call, which, I want to get away from that term, because we need to start creating more warm leads in order to start using video. Todd talks a lot about that, where we're messing up online video, where people are just doing copy paste kind of generic type of videos, sending it all out, and they're ruining it. And now people don't even want to look at video anymore. Yeah. So we'll get into that whole conversation, but let me give you the floor to just talk about, how do you create pattern interruption in the buyer's mind and the prospect's mind? What are some of the tricks and techniques and tools, and how do you use that effectively?
Yeah, so there's a couple different roads that I can go with this, and I'm going to start in a non-salesy way. I'm going to start away from my product, because where it actually starts is with your personal branding. It honestly does. So you talked about how when you're going through LinkedIn, you can spot one of my videos, right? It's pretty easy when you're scrolling down a feed. If like I've put out a new video, you're going to see it. And why that is because I'm hyper focused on the visual aspect of personal branding just as much as the emotional side of personal branding. I wear the same shirt almost all day of my life. I have 15 of this shirt right here.
Wow.
Underneath this shirt is my company's shirt, my logo t-shirt. I wear that when it's summer and it's warm. But that's part of the visual branding, just like your company has a logo on their door, just like Pepsi has their logo on every can. That's there so that when you see it across a room, you go, oh, that's a Pepsi can, right? You're not going to confuse a Pepsi can with a Budweiser. Totally different brand imaging, right? It's very important to think about. So I consider a lot of things critical in my personal branding approach. The way I'm shooting this video right now, John, like this is how I show up on everything that I do. If you see my videos, my camera is always right there. I always have the f-stops at the exact same place so that the background is blurred out nicely and you can't see anything happening. And the background is, it's a very thought out design in my office in a way where I have multiple content production areas in my office. I have 3 different content production areas in my office. And that way, when I'm doing different types of content, whether it's the Founders Mentality podcast, the Buyer Enablement podcast, a little show I do called Let Me Ask You This, whether it's a sales tips video, whatever it might be, you know what I'm talking about because you become aware of the visual around that. So if you don't like the series we were doing called On the Rocks, if that was a little too tongue-in-cheek and a little too, amateur or immature for you, then you wouldn't watch those. But you knew it was On the Rocks because we had specific setup and specific branding attached to that. And so the people that did want to hear that stuff would stop and tune into those sorts of things. This is all super, super important to me because this is how you disrupt somebody's pattern on LinkedIn. If you don't have a strategy around this, it goes back to the rule of 3s in advertising, which I think now is like the rule of like 15 because we see so many things. There's so much more being thrown at us. But it used to be said that if you were going to place an advertisement in a print publication, that you had to run that ad, the same ad, 3 times before anyone even noticed it, right? The same exact ad 3 times in a print publication before anyone had even noticed it. Now look at on a social channel, how busy that is, how many people there are fighting for space, fighting to get heard, all of that stuff. If you're just putting out random bits of information with no correlation to each other, nothing visually to tie it all together, then it's just another piece of noise that when people get into their death scroll, they just keep moving on past. But if you're somebody that's bringing value to an audience, and if that audience starts to want more from you when they are scrolling through the death scroll, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, whoops, that was one of Josh's things. I'm gonna scroll back up a little quick, right? That's how you start pulling people in. And that's where it starts. If you can build your personal brand, if you can be known for a thing that you're good at, then people start to trust you for that. And people start to seek you out for advice on that. And that's the basis of social selling, right? I try to never connect and sell with people. There are times where I'll come across an article and it's like right now your president cited that you have a need for a product like ours and I'd really love to have a conversation with you. I might do it in that way. But literally just this morning, I had a demo call at 8 a.m. I don't know if I should say the company, but it's a huge company. It's like a dream customer of mine, absolute dream customer of mine. Would be incredible to put their logo on my website. I have been having conversations with that individual for the last 1.5 years of my life. I originally met the individual I had a conversation with at a live event that I spoke at 1.5 years ago. I have never once sold him, but he's engaged with my content this whole time. And then just the other day, he sent me a personal message. And in that personal message, it seemed like he was finally ready to be sold to. And I just responded to him and said, hey, I've never given you a full demo of my product. And if that's something that you're looking for, here's a link. Go check out this page, grab some time on my calendar. Boom, immediately he did it, right? And it was the right time to have that conversation. And it was an incredible meeting just this morning. And I'm super excited about what might happen from that. But I think, when you're building your personal brand, I think the reason I'm telling that story is the one thing that everybody has to keep in mind is that it doesn't happen overnight. There has to be a lot of repetition. You're going to have a lot of failures. You're going to try a lot of different things. But the number one thing you have to do is show up every day. The other thing you have to do is be yourself. Talk about things that you actually are passionate about and actually do know about, right? Because you're going to get caught in a lie otherwise. And people don't want to learn from another thought leader that doesn't actually have any background in what they're talking about. There's enough of those contributing to the noise on LinkedIn. So stay in your lane, right? Pick your lane, pick what you want to talk about, learn as much as you can about that. Do things like this with other smart people so that you can learn from them as well. Because every time I do a podcast with somebody, whether they're a guest on my show or I'm a guest on their show, I'm there to learn. I'm absorbing, I'm a sponge. And then I'm going to take that learning, I'm going to apply it to my life. And once I make sure that that actually does work and that what they taught me is fact and is going to help me in my efforts, then I want to give it back to my audience as well. If you can master the recipe on that, it's going to help your efforts tremendously. And, like you said, we talked about this on my podcast. Your personal brand is the one thing no one can ever take away from you, buddy. It's the one thing they can't take away from you. I've had so many things taken away from me in this world. Life is hard. Life is challenging.
Right.
You think this crisis is a crisis. Salespeople are the most well-equipped individuals to sell in crisis in the entire world because every month we are in crisis. Every month, leaderboard is wiped down to zero and you got to get your quota this month. How the hell are you going to do it? It is a chaotic life that sales professionals live. We can thrive in this because we've been thriving in crisis for hundreds of years in sales.
Yep, 100%. I mean, that's why, take a look at the gray hair. I've been in sales for over 12 years. And when I started, I had jet black hair, just like you. And then now look, I mean, it's like you said, it's funny that, it's funny that a lot of people get into sales because they want to control their own income. But then they realize, I really think that sales should be taught in college. Like there should be, you should get out of college and you should have to get a sales job when you get started, because it teaches you so much about other aspects of business. And I love, the best thing I love, Josh, is those no soliciting signs on the front of doors, because we're all solicitors. Even if you're an attorney, right? You're soliciting for your services. Even if you're a whatever, if you have a storefront, a traditional B2B, small, mom and pop, brick and mortar business, you're soliciting something, a hardware store, whatever it is, you're soliciting. We're all solicitors. So you should learn how to do it the right way and professional so we don't have a bad name in the industry. And, the truth is, going back to what you were saying, I think a lot of salespeople who watch this, or folks who are watching this, whether they're in sales or whether they're executives just trying to build their own brand, their online presence, they think, oh my God, they may hear your story, and congratulations on you having that meeting this morning, but they may hear the stories and they think, man, it's going to take me a year and a half to cultivate and curate these type of relationships. I don't have that time. I need to hit my quota this month, right? And it does take time. But the truth is, you don't need to be a social media master or wizard or have a lot of followers to be able to get more appointments with your prospects. You just need to learn how to engage with your target in a different way. And that's what we're kind of talking about. And while we're on this topic, we have a couple of questions from the audience. Jake did hop on. Hello, Jake. I hope you're still on watching. We did ask your question earlier. You may have to go check it out on the previous once we're done with this. But I asked your question for you when we talked about having an overview of the overall sales process, how it's changed in the last year with COVID. Cheers to you, sir. But yeah, we did that about in the I think it was the 15 to 20 minute mark where we asked that question. So you can go back and check it out. But I want to talk about a question that we got from Larry. He asked, do you see the sales experience interaction changing when sponsors return to supporting association networking events? So kind of an interesting take, right? We've been focusing the whole time about the salesperson and how to engage with the prospect. But what about if you're selling sponsorships to corporations who have donated in the past? And look, everyone's budget is tight right now. COVID has affected everyone in every way. And so how do you go back when we go back to this, to these networking events and association events, when we're talking about, getting sponsorship support?
So I am not an expert on, sponsorships and networking events. So I won't talk about this too long, but what I will say, the one thing I have been paying close attention to is if there was a part of the business community that was ripe for disruption in my mind, it was events. It was networking. There were so many live events that were just becoming so much like every other live event that they were almost becoming not effective. Specifically trade shows, the trade show arena has been ripe for disruption for years. Let's think about trade shows right now. So a trade show, and I know everybody's probably like, man, when was the last time I was at a trade show? I know, right? It's been 10 months at a minimum. But let's think about a trade show. You walk into a giant room. You walk into a giant convention center. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of tables set up. Everyone at that table is hoping you're going to stop by, and everyone at that table is hoping that when you stop by, they're going to be able to sell to you. You're walking down an aisle after aisle after aisle of people trying to get you to grab a bag, throwing crap in your bag, trying to get your business card, trying to follow up with you after the fact. None of us could ever remember any of those conversations that we had. Of all the trade shows I've been to in my life, after I'd go home, there was maybe one or two tables that I would actually remember. And the sad reality about trade shows was that when you went to them, if you weren't there, then it didn't happen, right? So if you wanted to experience what was being talked about and happening, you had to actually go in person, which many times meant hopping on an airplane, staying in a hotel that you didn't want to stay in, getting a restless night of sleep on a horrible mattress, and then going to a trade show where you just felt like completely ambushed by way too many people screaming things at you while you're walking down the hallway. It was not fun. It was not effective. And the fact that it happened in this vacuum and you could not experience it outside of being there, that I think has been a problem for years. And I'm picking on trade shows, but it's the exact same thing with events. Some of the more recent events that were happening right before COVID were absolutely starting to pull in more digital interactions and ways for people to be part of it without actually being there. But the events themselves were so great that people actually still wanted to be there. I mean, I think of like Drift. Drift was the last event that I actually flew out to go see in Boston. Their conference was called Hypergrowth, and it was absolutely amazing. There was a ton of digital components associated with it, and they recorded everything, and it turned in that be viewed by a worldwide audience after the fact. That was absolutely incredible. What I would just tell everybody, as far as like sponsors go, sponsors should be looking for more ways for the things that they're sponsoring to guarantee them that this isn't just going to happen on one day at one time in a vacuum and never happen again. You should be expecting a lot more digital awareness pre and post event. They should be looking for ways to turn the event into evergreen content in some capacity and attaching you to that in that space. I think that there's a huge market for somebody to really disrupt in this space, and I hope to see it. And I have a really great idea of how to do it, actually, but I'm not going to let myself do it right now. I'm too focused on SalesReach. But regardless, there's a huge market here. I would just say, Larry, from a sponsor perspective, expect more. Because what we've found is that you can get more if you're focused more on a digital first sort of strategy and in turning that content, whatever happens, into evergreen content that can live on beyond just the event.
Yep. And I'd also say, I think sales is universal. And so even if we're talking about selling to an individual or a team or a sponsor, as long as you still create the value, if you can add value to that person or to that sponsor and they feel that it's worth it for them, they're going to still buy, whether it's buying your product or buying a sponsorship. And, if they feel that they're going to create some sort of return on investment, if you can create that value, they'll continue to keep on buying. Companies realize that, while it is tough and there's all these different changes going on, they're going to find strategies and ways to get back that market share. And I think at the end of the day, advertisement is still always going to be there. So sponsorships and events and networking events still going to be critical to be able to invest into that. So just continue to create and add value. And Jake actually has another question for you, Josh. So check this out. As a founder, how do you recommend training in your first salesperson or training your first salesperson? So how do you recommend that?
Yeah, this is a good question. Just so you know, my battery is blinking red. So if I lose audio, jump in and I'll switch over to a different microphone. But until this dies, I'm just going to keep using this.
Sure.
So Jake, here's what I would say is there's so many different ways to bring on your sales professionals. But number one, you want to be setting them up for the most success you possibly can. I believe that, right? Try to, in my space where I'm at right now, I record a lot of the demo calls and conversations that I have with customers so that I can use those as training materials to just hand off to the new people coming in. Because that's a really great way for them to just see exactly how me as the CEO, how I talk to our customers at whatever stage they're in. And I think that that's important mainly because I think it's important for them to understand what is and is not okay when we're having conversations with people, right? Because for me specifically, I have a lot of fun on my calls. I do. I have a lot of fun on my demo calls. And I think that we do need to be entertaining our guests when they join us for these demonstrations or whatever the meeting is. Because if we're not entertaining them, then we're just adding another Zoom call to their day right now that they're going to be real bored with. But you have to give people the tools they need to get up to speed fast. Now, beyond that, I have a slightly different personal feeling than many other sales trainers. Many organizations will have a dedicated sales trainer manager that will be shadowing people and constantly giving them advice and all of that sort of stuff. And though I do think that it's important to constantly be monitoring what your sales team is doing and make sure they're growing and make sure that their messaging isn't getting stale, I'm more of the belief that if you equip them with the knowledge and the tools and you make sure that they understand exactly what they're selling, the ins and outs of it, and you make sure that they understand the competitive landscape so that when they're asked hard questions about how is this different from XYZ, they can answer well. As long as you give them that, after that, I prefer to have somebody that is going to be hungry enough to learn on their own, to be self-motivated, to grow, to be focused on hitting their revenue and working towards that every single day without too much hand-holding. I just feel like sometimes we give people too much hand-holding. Sometimes the support, in my experience, can be too much. The times that I've grown the most as a sales professional and in my personal life are the times when I have been challenged beyond what I thought I could tolerate. Those were the times that I got better. And I prefer to see people get to that moment and see how they respond with it and see if they can take it to the next level and improve and do better, or if they just lay over, wave the white flag and say, this is too much, this is too hard.
Very interesting there. And, I know that I know that you have, your mic is about to go out there, but I mean, and we're at the 43-minute mark, but I have some other questions for you. I want to dive in before we wrap up here. I can't let you go because I wouldn't be doing a disservice to the audience if I didn't ask this question. We touched on it on your podcast, the Buyer Enablement podcast, where we say, your SalesReach is all about what experience you want to create for your buyers, right? And I think I have a big fear when a lot of sales folks develop this relationship, they do all these steps that we're talking about doing. And then once they sign on the dotted line, they sign the contract, they now have to hand it off to the implementation team, who now has to develop a whole brand new relationship.
Yeah.
And what if they mess that up? And so we talked about that. We touched on that a little bit on your podcast, but I want to revisit that. Talk about how do you guys handle that and make sure that the buyer has a good experience even after they sign.
Yeah. All right. I switched on this other microphone.
So
Okay.
the good news about this is I'm going to sound more like Barry White. The bad news is my lips and my lips and the sound aren't going to sync properly because
All good.
whatever. So that's what's happening now, everybody. This is real life. Before I get into that, Jake did follow up and he just said, how much bandwidth do you think you should give them before moving on with them? Right.
Yep.
That's a really hard one, man. Because I think that when you see somebody being challenged in a role, you have two choices. You either move them into a different role where maybe you found skills that you weren't tasking them with before that would be a better fit for them. So you can always try to do that if that's an opportunity. If it's not, though, I think that the thing that everybody needs to realize, anybody that is hiring, anyone out there that's a manager, a leader in an organization, letting people go is really, really challenging. But I think that when you do find that it's not a good fit for somebody, and honestly, like the first 3 months in any sales role should be a grace period. The first 3 months should be like, learn the ropes, get up to speed, not expecting you to bring in anything crazy. But after the first 3 months, in my mind, every single month should be incrementally getting closer to whatever the minimum expectation is of that role, right? And by the 6-month point, you should know right now whether or not this is actually going to be a fit, right? And I think that personally, beyond 6 months, every time I've ever been a sales manager in my life, the people that weren't performing at the 6-month point weren't performing at the 12-month point either, right? So you either had to find a new role or move on. But when you move on, we have a responsibility as leaders to move on in a way that it's not penalizing, it's not mean. We should be helping them into whatever their next role is. And many people that have worked for me or with me in my life hopefully can attest that if they're looking for a new role, I bend over backwards to align them with people in my network that I think they would be a good fit for. The last person that I had to let go at my business, it was right at the height of COVID, and we were a little scared about what was going to be happening in the business. And so we really had to look at what are the critical and non-critical roles for right now entering into a pandemic. And I unfortunately did have to eliminate one role that I really didn't want to eliminate, but really talented guy. And within 2 weeks, I aligned him with an incredible position where he was able to go and make more money than he was making with me, with a lot of opportunity. And it felt really good. So I think that we need to be focusing on that as leaders, especially in this crisis, in this pandemic we're in. We're still not out of it. There's still companies that are just holding on and are trying as hard as they can to just keep everybody engaged and keep everybody involved and not have to let go of anybody. And then when they do decide they have to, many times, unfortunately, it's been too late. But when they're identifying who needs to go, they're many times looking at the ones that just haven't been able to find success. And there's a lot of sales reps right now that are having a hard time finding success because there's a lot of sales reps right now that are having a really hard time pivoting and changing their focus. So sorry to go off on that rant a little bit there. Can you quickly rephrase the question that you led me in on that one, if you can even remember at this point?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to know, we were talking about on our episode about how, you talk about the experience that you want to create for buyers. And I talk about the thing that I fear most in the sales role is once you develop the relationship, then you have to pivot and hand it off to a project management team. And they now a new department has to establish a relationship.
Yeah, now I
How
got
do you
it.
handle that experience with your buyers? How do you mitigate that?
Listen, this is something I talk about a lot because I think that it's not hard to understand once you hear it said. The most stressful time for any customer in the sales process is the second they sign on the dotted line and hand you a check. That's the most stressful time. This isn't hard to understand because buyer's remorse is the most basic human feeling. It's the most basic human emotion. We all have buyer's remorse all day long. How many times have you gone out and bought anything, even a $20 item that you got home and you went, did I really need this?
did I really need this new candle on this coffee table? Like, I had a candle here. It was fine. But yeah, I guess it was red, which is kind of Christmassy, and it's not Christmas anymore. So maybe I needed a white one. I don't know. But did I need that right now? It's $20. Imagine multi-million-dollar deals. Imagine the buyer's remorse that goes into that. And keep in mind that when somebody signed on that dotted line, it was somebody putting their neck on the line for you. They were literally putting their personal stamp of approval on it and saying, this is the vendor that I think we should go with. I endorse them and I'm moving forward with them. But when that buyer's remorse steps in, the only thing that we can do to eliminate as much of it as humanly possible, because there's always going to be a little amount, like immediately there's going to be a little amount that steps in. But the second we start dropping balls, that's when it starts building and building and building. And so many organizations have this breakdown when it goes from sales to the next group that it goes to. It might be onboarding and training. It might be customer success, might be project management. Depends on your industry and what you do for a living and what your business is. But it always goes somewhere else, right? And when that happens, you have to really think about, all the teams have to be thinking about creating a better experience. It's not just sales that needs to make a better experience. Onboarding and training teams, specifically in the technology space, they really need to focus on this. Many of our customers at SalesReach use our platform to make a better onboarding experience for their customers, and they're reducing churn rate because of it, because they're realizing that, like, when we this and did this, people didn't understand how to use our product, and we were just fine with just selling them on it and looping them into a 12-month contract. But it's just like Mark Benioff says in his book that I'm reading right now, the number one predictor of a company's success is the renewal rates, right? Like, our people, after you've locked them in for that indefinite amount of time, whatever that amount of time is that you signed them in for, maybe 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, after that's done, do they stay with you? Because if they don't, then you know you have a problem. And that problem is probably in your customer success. It's probably in your onboarding and training. Most of the time, if it's a problem in sales, you know about it before the contract ends. If it's a problem in sales, you have the immediate upset customer within the first couple months that's going, this is not at all what I was told this was going to be. I was told it was going to do this and this and this, and this thing does not do any of those things for me, and this is not meeting my needs. Those customers leave way before their contract ends, right? They fight and they claw and they get the hell out of it. But if people stay on through the duration of their contract and then they're not renewing, then you know it was a customer success. It was a training. They just didn't find the value because they didn't understand how to use it. It could be a myriad of things, but that's where that buyer's remorse grows and grows. I just landed a deal just the other day with a company that was using one of my competitors. They've been locked into a 2-year agreement with this company, and they've literally hated it from day one. And it never provided value. It was too challenging for anyone to use. The adoption rates were insanely low. And they came to me and they said, look, we've talked to the team and they've committed. They've said that they want to use your platform and that they will use your platform. We still have 6 months left on this thing, and we're going to start yours right now. We're just going to consider that a while because we have enough. We can't wait for that contract to run out before we move forward with something new, but we also can't get our money back. So we're just going to cut ties right now. That money's spent, that money's gone. Now we're going to move forward here, right? That, can you imagine, like, how does a company get to the point where they have given their customers so little service, so little value, so little reassurance, has not fixed things at all for them? They've just kind of let things go on autopilot for almost 2 entire years. And then they're moving forward with a competing product, something that does some very similar things, just because they don't want to be with this anymore. It's actually, like, I've seen it happen before. You actually have to work really hard. Once somebody's moved forward with you and has put money in the bank account with you, you have to work really hard to lose that customer because they're invested. They've put money in there, want this to work. They really do. But when you lose them, you know, you got to figure out where those problems were. Was it a product problem? Was it a training problem? Was it is it not actually, are we not going after the right market here? What's the problem? You got to figure that out. But you do have to pay attention to the experience from any customer facing team. Critically important, because again, the baseline's being set first by marketing. Marketing's delighting these customers, getting them to raise their hands, say they're interested. Then sales comes into the picture. We're entertainers. We like to make people feel welcome. We like to do all kinds of fun things, right? It's fun working with sales if we're doing it right? And then you move on from sales. It can't get hard then. that's when it actually has to get even more fun. That's when it has to be even more easy, more engaging, because now you're a customer. We're not fighting for your business. We're just fighting to make sure that you're getting maximum value every single day. If that's your focus, you're going to win.
I love it. I love it. And so listen, Josh, is an amazing topic that you covered there. I can go on with you for days talking about that one aspect, just that, right? But there's so much more to cover. I mean, what we do is we help sales professionals get more appointments and also be able to reach their prospects in a different way without having these complicated old sales techniques, and also leverage the power of what we're teaching, whether it's social media, whether it's the sales process, creating an experience for your buyers. That's what we do. So, Josh, I really appreciate it. I think we had some great engagement from the audience. And for you guys, as you can see, Josh is an expert in what we do. If you want more information about what he does and how you can link up with him, obviously you can connect with him on LinkedIn and all social media platforms. But if you want to take a look at his website, go to www.salesreach.io. I want to show it to you guys again, just so you guys can see what it looks like, because I think it's a super cool website and the way it looks there. You can take a look at some testimonials lower down on the page there. You can also take a look at his blog. This is where you'll see more information about the Buyer Enablement podcast, where you'll see, oh, look at that good looking guy right there. You'll see a guy
we gotta
there.
get that off the site right away. Wow. Yeah.
You'll see more information. Other episodes. There's Todd Capone. There's some other folks there talking about different things. So take a look at his website. Take a look at his blog. Link up with Josh if you guys have any questions about doing that stuff there. And we're really excited to have you on, Josh. Thank you so much for being here. You've added value to my audience.
Yeah, no worries. And the page that I shared with you earlier, make sure, if you're tuning in, I had cited the Gartner study, and I loaded that onto the page. So anybody that's interested in reading more about that, I put a couple of those articles on that page for people. And you'll also have a direct link to my calendar right off that page. So if you are interested in reviewing this for your teams, you can get all that info there. And that page, by the way, that is our software. That's the output of it, right? So when I send a page to somebody, that's what I'm talking about. That's the page. All those materials organized there. They're not being loaded into an email with a bunch of attachments and links. It's all in one place where people can find everything they need. So check out that link that I had put into the comments, or that John had added to the comments for me. If you want some time with me, that'd be great. But definitely check out those Gartner studies on there, because it's gold. And whether or not you use SalesReach, it will change the way you think about engaging with your customers right now. Just reading those 2 articles alone.
Love it. Good stuff, Josh. Hang on there for a second while we wrap up the show. So that was Selling During Crisis, episode number 9. Like Josh said, you can go to the comment section, check out that link, go to his website, get more information. I think this was a super impactful, very knowledgeable episode. Join us. We're going to take a little bit break for a couple of days, but we'll be back next week on Monday with our next guest on episode 10 of Selling During Crisis. You won't want to miss it. We'll start promoting that. But go to Josh's website, check it out. And as we end every single episode, now that you have this knowledge and now that you've gotten some golden nuggets, take that, go out and sell something. Everyone have a great day. Have a great weekend. Take care.